Okay, Next Level Podcast listeners, we are back. I am your host, Kevin Kauffman, and today I am joined by John Mitchell, and I'm really been looking forward to this phone call, John. I actually had the opportunity to listen to you do what is called the 10-minute talk in the last few months, probably, but must have been about 4 or 5 months ago now that I heard it at a Genius Network meeting, and it really struck a chord with me, and most importantly, what I had seen is it had clearly struck a chord with you, that the message that you were teaching about had obviously made such a big impact in your life and in your business that I thought, wow, this is really cool. So when I got the opportunity to interview you, John, I just sort of jumped right on it because I thought, not going to get this opportunity every day. So thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Kevin, my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Well, awesome. So John, why don't we do this? So, obviously I kind of, I gave the rundown and everything in the introduction of some of your different accomplishments, but would you mind giving us a little background on who you are and kind of, I don't want to just jump right into it. The main thing I want to talk about today is the 12 minutes a day, but I don't want to jump right into that. What I'd love to do is kind of hear a little bit more of your story in business and in life and kind of how you arrived to where we're at today.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, Kevin, I started out as a CPA and became an entrepreneur when I was 30. But when I turned 50, I just wasn't as successful as I thought I should be. And Kevin, I had two goals in my life. The first one was to make enough money so I didn't have to work. And the second one was to find the woman of my dreams. And at 50, I was unfortunately falling short on both of them. And as an entrepreneur, I was always blessed to make well into six figures a year, but never close to $1 million a year. And on finding the girl, I'd never been married at 50. Although I can tell you it was not from lack of interview. Did a lot of interviewing.
I love that. You realize it's a gotta interview, right?
That's right. That's right. But then the defining moment for me happened like 3 days after I turned 50. And I realized that if I didn't start netting over $1 million a year, I would never have that exceptional life I always dreamed of. The freedom, the lifestyle, the sense of accomplishment. And so I came to a realization, and I realized, Kevin, that hard work doesn't work. While it works for making six figures a year, I felt like I was living proof that it didn't work for seven. And I just knew there had to be something else. So I made the decision to go find whatever that something else is. So I'm puzzled as to how to do that. And I then about 3 months after I turned 50, a pearl of wisdom hits me. Why not find the top book in the world on success and achievement ever written and then apply it literally word for word to my life? And that logic was so compelling and simple. And so after a little research, I found that there actually is one book that excels over all others on the topic, and it's Think and Grow Rich. Are you familiar with Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah, it's funny. At this point in time, I almost don't even know anybody that hasn't at least heard of, if not read that book or listened to the audio version of that book at least once, right? That has been one of the just for entrepreneurs and, especially, and granted, most of us are in real estate, but some of the folks listening are in mortgage and title and some of the other businesses that help real estate. This is an industry of entrepreneurs. And so almost everybody I'm around has absolutely heard of that book as well.
Right. Well, there's two significant facts that a lot of people aren't aware of. And the first one is that the book has sold over 100 million copies worldwide, whereas the next best-selling book on success has sold just under 10 million copies. So it's the top book ever written on success by a factor of 10. I mean, isn't that amazing?
When you really think about that, that's significant. That's not sort of the leader. That is the, by far and away, not even close leader in when it comes to those books. That's amazing.
Well, and the irony of it is that everybody wants to be more successful, and they don't know what the top book in the world on success is by a factor of 10.
Yeah.
It shows you the world of clutter we live in, right?
Well, we do, right? And maybe you experience this too. I'd be curious because of your own journey, but there is so much information out there that sometimes it can be hard to sort of distill it. In fact, the mentor that I had in my life, who actually introduced me to Think and Grow Rich, he unfortunately passed away now, but he wrote a book called "If How-Tos Were Enough, We'd All Be Skinny, Rich, and Happy."
Right.
And it's because it's really not about, do I know what to do? Because there is all of this information that's out and coming at us, right?
Right.
But like you said, most people don't even realize that it's Think and Grow Rich is by far and away number one, the most successful book in that realm. But then number two, we're just being inundated with all of this information all the time, it seems.
Right. Right. Well, and the other thing that's significant about the book is that the central concept has created more millionaires and billionaires than any other concept on the planet. And so when I sort of realized those facts, of course, I read the book, and the central concept is what you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And let me say that again. What you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. But then I discovered a problem, and it was a pretty big problem, Kevin. Great idea, but how to apply it in a practical way. And so after probably moping around for a couple of weeks after I read the book, I realized that I had to create the practical application. And so I did, and I applied it to a new business I was starting in the real estate business. And over 9 years, I continually tweaked and refined my 12-minute a day methodology. And over that 9 years, my income went from low six figures a year to over $5 million a year. And of course, I felt so incredibly blessed. I mean, Kevin, it was like a 25 time increase over what had been the prior 20 years. And most surprisingly, I could actually see why it was happening. By applying science to my life for really the first time ever, I was influencing my daily actions and thoughts. And clearly, I was operating at a higher level than I ever had before. And I could actually feel it. I could see and feel that I was more focused, disciplined, and leveraged.
So
And really, the best news was I also met the woman of my dreams for doing this.
that's awesome.
So to wrap up the story, the results changed me as an entrepreneur, and I became really fascinated by the fact that you could take two key scientific principles and apply them to your life and so materially impact your success and achievement in life. And it just amazed me that such a small change that only took 12 minutes a day could radically change one's outcomes. And I found that so, I don't know, intellectually interesting that I ended up selling my company. And I guess it was probably 3 months after I sold my company, I had the good fortune to meet the former chancellor and president at the University of Texas. And I told him my story, and he said, "Hey, you have to teach this mental technique at the University of Texas, and why don't we teach it together?" So today, that's what I do, but my real passion is teaching it to six-figure-a-year entrepreneurs who struggle to cross over to netting seven figures a year, just like I struggled,
So,
and who really want that exceptional life.
so John, let me ask you this. At what age were you when you went from six figures to netting the first year that you netted seven figures?
Let me think about that. I think it was, I was 54.
Okay. And how long had you been in business for yourself?
Since 30, so 24 years.
Okay. So, and what I'm getting at here is it's not like this. This wasn't like your typical hockey stick. Hey, I get in business and I keep building it. And a couple years later, it keeps getting bigger and bigger, which
Right.
I think a lot of people, that's that, sometimes can look like an overnight sensation.
Right.
But it really takes 10 years. So here you are 2.5 decades into your career before you go from, by all means successful, right? Making six figures a year, at least financially speaking, to really breaking through a ceiling. Now, that's a big change. And that is something that a lot of people, especially in real estate, don't experience. I think we tend to get into real estate and we sort of take this on as like, well, I'm a $3 million a year or I'm a $10 million a year producer.
Right.
And you went, okay, well, I'm from here. And then 2.5 decades later, you went from here to here. That's a big jump. So I got to know more about this. Like okay, so it's 2 scientific facts you just started using
Right.
to help you. We got to dive into this some, because this is pretty amazing stuff. You don't see that sort of increase after that period of time with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Right. Well, the fundamental thing about it is I came to realize that one's ongoing thoughts determine your success. I mean, I never thought that deeply about that, but that's what the top book in the world on success says. And the thing, and we sort of touched on it a minute ago, but I see that for me, only 1 in 6 people has really knows about Think and Grow Rich, and I'd say 1 in 100 knows its central concept. Yet everybody wants to be more successful, and like we were alluding to a minute ago, this clutter that we live in, I think, blinds us to things that are just profound. And I think the other thing that sort of raises, well, why, if 100 million people have read that book, why aren't 100 million people wildly successful, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the obvious one, right?
Well, and here's why. This is what's interesting. In the book, Think and Grow Rich, on the first page, the author says, there's a secret to creating success, and I'm going to give you half of the secret, but it's on you to figure out the other half. Well, back when Think and Grow Rich was written, it was a different time where people probably had more of an attention span, and they dig in and they figure it out. And so what I'm going to share with your audience today is the full secret. And the other thing that as I alluded to about Think and Grow Rich is when I read it, there wasn't a practical way to apply it. And I see now, Kevin, that it was that pressure of turning 50 and knowing, hey, I got to figure this out. And what am I going to go find a better book? Because I read the book when I was 41 and thought it was a great book, but to no effect. But when I was 50 and realizing, unless I start netting 7 figures a year, I'm going to have a good life, but I'm not going to have the exceptional life. And so that pressure made me figure out how to apply this amazing book.
That's pretty phenomenal. Again, the rarity in your story, it just, it doesn't happen. I think a lot of us, I know I'll speak for myself. I try to surround myself with really successful people, and I don't usually see this type of change when I really look at their career. It's usually done in a much different manner. So to me, I'm so fascinated, because there are so many folks in our industry, and others, by all means, this isn't just a real estate problem, who want more and quite frankly just aren't sure what to do. They aren't sure how to get from okay to exceptional, right? Having that exceptional life and that exceptional business. And I've heard you say too, like, if you're not as successful as you think you should be, it's not your fault. You're just missing some information, right?
Right.
Because when you get it like you did, everything can change. What do you tell me what you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that, Kevin, is that all of us are operating with an antiquated operating system to run our life.
Yep.
That gears us to survival. And the effect of that is really 3 things. First, it causes 90% of your thoughts to be fear-based. Secondly, it causes you to be reactive, not proactive on your important agenda. And the third thing is it just doesn't allow you to operate in a way that makes you productive, creative, and happy. And if you think about it, you're geared to survival. Well, that's great, if you were running from lions. But what you want is you got to be productive, creative, and happy. And you have to overcome this idea that 90% of your thoughts are fear-based and you're reactive rather than proactive. And the only way you can overcome that is by programming your subconscious mind. That's the only way to do it.
So, okay, so you just said something maybe. So is that what the 12 minutes a day methodology is it's programming? Like you're
Exactly.
essentially programming yourself. Can you give me an example of that?
Well, let me share with you a couple of things, and I'll really get into
Okay.
exactly what it is. You know, a couple of things that from now looking back on my life that I think may help your audience is the number one thing I learned is if you do life like everybody else, you're going to get an average life. Right? Would you
True.
agree with that?
Absolutely. Amen. Yeah.
I mean, it's pure math, and you sort of hit on this, and I thought it was interesting. People go, well, okay, well, how do I do life different than everybody else? I mean, everybody sort of puts their head down and works hard, right? That's my experience. Well, yeah, but that's going to working hard will give you a good life, but it's not going to give you the exceptional life. And so that idea that if I do life like everybody else, then I'm going to get an average life. And so what I'm going to share with your audience is a new way of thinking, a new way of doing life. And the other thing that was significant when I turned 50 was I was reflective about my life by the nature of turning a decade birthday, and so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to take each part of my life and evaluate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And so I pitched this out to your audience. Think about your career and think what you've made on average, what you've netted the last 3 years, and on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your career, and then move over to your romantic relationship. Scale of 1 to 10. How's that relationship or that side of your life? And then your health, scale of 1 to 10. How would you rate your ability to control your weight and your appearance? And so when I did that at 50, Kevin, I didn't really like what I saw. And, that's what really created that incentive to go get this book, Think and Grow Rich, because it was clear to me, obviously the solution wasn't in my head, because if it was in my head, I'd already have implemented. So it had to come from the outside. And so that having that presence of mind to do that, I see now was so impactful because I reflect back on all the pain I felt in my 30s and 40s from feeling like life was passing me by, and that there was a disconnect between the effort I'm putting in and the results I'm getting out. And I think a lot of people feel stress because of this lack of control over their life. Above all else, this lack of control, and that's exactly what this 12-minute a day technique gives you, is control over your life. Does that make sense?
Sure does. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can think of different exercises. Sometimes it's like in a wheel. You talk about that 1 to 10. Rating
Right,
those things one to
right.
ten, because then it allows you to see, like, hey, if that was an actual wheel, like, well, how would your car move, or
Yeah,
how would that wheel roll? And in some cases, it wouldn't roll because you might be out of whack here this time, and this over here might be good, but this other thing's suffering, and it really takes the balance of all those parts of our lives to not just live the good life, but it's the exceptional. You use the word exceptional, having that exceptional life that you had dreamed about. And I think, quite frankly, most entrepreneurs think that they're signing up for is an
right.
exceptional life, not an average one.
Well, yeah, right. And I mean, I may sound materialistic that saying I want to make 7 figures a year, but I'm not ashamed of that. Yes, I want the fabulous house on the lake. I want the nest egg, where I don't have to work. One of the things I discovered is, what good is all that if you don't have a great significant other relationship to share it with, and you don't have your health. And you,
Absolutely.
and one of the things that I thought was interesting as I was, getting into, understanding the process of success, over the last 20 years, there's been an intense interest in the behavioral science so to figure out what makes the mega achievers different than everybody else. And what they've discovered It really is pretty simple. It comes down to two things. It's control of self and focus. Control of self and focus. Well, that's exactly what this 12-minute a day mental technique teaches you. And you know what I think is interesting, at least from my perspective, is people go, well, how is this different than everything else in the success business? Well, the difference is pretty profound. Everything else is strategies, and oftentimes very good strategies. But you have strategies coming out your ears.
Hmm.
What you need is the way to get great strategies to show up in your daily thoughts and actions, because that's what is determining your success. And that's what makes this radically different than everything else in the success field.
Got it. So that makes sense to me. So let's dive further into
Okay.
this. Tell me more. Maybe I mean, what are these two pieces to this 12 minutes a day? And because to be truthful, I'm interested in knowing why it works too. I have a
Right.
hunch,
Right.
but I'm interested in knowing why it works, and of course, I want to know how. I want to know
Right.
what to do and how to do it.
Right.
But I am also interested in knowing like why does that work?
Right. Well, and let's dive right into it and let me really dig into it. So essentially, this is how it works. We take your life and compress it down to one sheet of paper, front and back.
Okay.
On the front is the ideal you in the 5 key areas of your life: yourself, your health, your romantic relationship, your spirituality, and your career. So, ideal you in those 5 key areas on the front. Then on the back, we have the improvements you want in each area of your life, plus your top 3 goals for the quarter. One will be in your career, one in your relationship, one in your health, typically.
Okay.
And then on the bottom, we're tracking your key behaviors associated with your goals. And so now keep in mind, we're applying that central concept of Think and Grow Rich, which is what you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. So what you're essentially doing is you're feeding yourself, here's exactly the person I want to be, here's exactly what I want to accomplish, and here's precisely how I'm going to achieve my clearly defined goals. And so after 21 days of that, approximately, then the science kicks in, and what you're feeding yourself starts to show up in your thoughts and actions automatically without thinking. And that's the magic of that. That's the science kicking in. And I'll give you an example of how it works. So as I mentioned, I didn't get married until I was in my 50s. And one of the things I discovered, Kevin, was that my married friends failed to share with me that every once in a while your spouse would say something irritating. Are you married?
I am. Yeah, I could have told you that.
Has that, you know, I wish I'd known you then. But but so I didn't know that, and you know, when it happened to me, you know, getting married late in life, I'm like, man, I'm just lucky somebody would have me. And so, you know, I darn sure want to keep her. And so um, I thought, okay, I'm going to put in my uh, daily think it be it template. I'm going to put in there that I am flexible, patient, and thoughtful. And so, Kevin, I start reading that every day. Well, 15 days in, nothing. I mean, I'm no more flexible, patient, or thoughtful than I was when I started. But about the 21st day, my precious wife, Ginger, says something irritating. And I'm telling you, in that moment, I was flexible, patient, and thoughtful. I mean, that is literally who I had become and who I am today from simply feeding it to myself every day. And when that happened, uh, it was like a light bulb going on. I'm like, oh, I see how this works. I feed what I want in detail to myself, and after 21 days, the science kicks in, and it shows up in your thoughts and actions. And I'll explain now the science behind that, why that happens, if that's okay.
Please do. Yes.
Okay. So here's how the mind works. The conscious mind sets your intention, and is influenced by logic. But your subconscious mind controls your everyday thoughts and ongoing actions, and it's only influenced by repetition. And as an example of this, let's say you want to lose weight. Well, the conscious mind sets the intention to lose weight based on the logic of the health benefits, right? So it sees the benefits of being healthy and eating and exercising. Well, the reason people aren't losing weight is not from lack of intention, it's from lack of influencing their subconscious mind, which controls their everyday thoughts and actions, which is eating and exercising. And so once you sort of see that, oh, the subconscious mind only responds to repetition. That's why when you're feeding this to yourself every day, um, it's influencing that part of the brain that controls your thoughts in the only way that you can, which is again repetition. We're used to trying to influence ourselves with logic, but that only sets the attention. It doesn't set influencing your thoughts and actions. And so that's the simple science behind this.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense to me. I totally get that. So, and forgive me if I'm jumping ahead, but I'm curious. So I'm getting the concept here of what we're doing and how it works. Why is it 12 minutes a day? Why isn't it 13 minutes a day or 10 and a half minutes a day? I'm curious.
Well, it's a fine line, I think, between too much and too little. Uh, I just found that 12 was sort of the magic number, and again, you're trying to be, and this only works when you're really specific. The subconscious mind does not respond to things that are general, and so as you're articulating the ideal you and exactly what you want to accomplish and how you're going to achieve your goals, you've got to go into enough detail to impact the subconscious mind. And so what ends up happening, and I have an online course that I teach people how to do this with, it's really a three-step process. One, you got to fill out the questionnaire and figure out all the things with your life and see it in detail. And then we put it on this template that compresses it down so that it only takes 12 minutes 12 minutes a day to read it, and then each day you start reading it. So that's sort of the process.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this question too. So I'm honestly, what's going through my mind right now is my kids.
Right.
And my kids are younger. They're small. They're in grade school and younger. And one of the things I've noticed is, in a way, there are, like, as an example, I'm a diehard Raiders fan. I'm a big football fan and love the Raiders. I love the Dodgers baseball and the Lakers in basketball. And
Right.
At the young ages that they are, I have them convinced or programmed, if you will, subconsciously, that it matters when those teams win or lose. And
Right.
so, it's funny. I can see that, how that already shows up in their young lives, how important sort of programming ourselves can be. And obviously that's a very lighthearted
Right.
example of that. But what I'm thinking as you're saying this is this something that can be applied to kids? Like, could I sit down with, say, my 6 or 7-year-old and say, hey, walk them through the questions and help them start to design what it is that they want to? Now, maybe it's not 12 minutes. I don't know. Maybe they're
Right.
7 minutes a day for all I know. But does that work on them too? Or is this something where, well, no, you really got to be an adult and kind of have a fully developed brain, things like that?
No, I think it works on kids as well. I mean, I teach it to 21-year-olds, in college, but it works whatever age, because success ultimately comes down to seeing what you want in detail and feeding that to yourself each day. And so I think, it'd work with kids and parenting and the question I get a lot is, well, wait a minute, how did your income go from 20 years of 6 figures a year and all of a sudden to mid 7 figures? And explain how that really happened. And so what really it is in this 12-minute a day mental technique, you're feeding to yourself four things in the career part. You're feeding your business plan, your strategy for success, the three things that move the needle, and then the linchpin issue in your business, whatever it is that moves it to that next level. And so you feed this to yourself every day, those four things. And and what ends up happening is three things essentially happen. First of all, that business plan is really easy to implement because it's so top of mind. And then secondly, you're laser focused, Kevin, on what moves the needle, because you know that your time is your most valuable commodity. And when you're feeding yourself every day, here's what moves uh, the needle starts to move because that's what you're focused on. And the surprise of this was I discovered that your strategy for success starts to move forward probably 20 times quicker than it ever had before by simply feeding your succinct articulation of your strategy for success, because your subconscious mind is constantly challenging it, refining it. And so if I felt this momentum from doing it every day, I would see my business deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper I saw it, the more money I made.
Got it. So that, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. So you, I hate to go back, but I kind of want to go backwards because you spurred something for me. So you had this moment, this reflection point of, hey, I've got to do some things differently. Where should I go? You went, obviously it should be, I need to reevaluate Think and Grow Rich. It's the,
Right.
it's the best-selling book in what I'm trying to accomplish at this point in my life. How did you come up with, okay, did you just go back and study it and then go, hey, these are the things that we've got to measure ourselves on, and then start to program our self-conscious, program our subconscious on? Was that just a discovery? Like, how long was this process? How long did that take you to go from reflection point, like I'm going to go read Think and Grow Rich
Right.
again or study it, to, hey, I actually have this thing now that I'm doing every day? And then
Right.
how long was it before that started, before the seven figures showed up,
Well,
and the wife?
great question. Well, so basically, I read the book at 50, and I had the same experience I had when I was 41, in that there wasn't a practical way to apply it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't give you what the secret is. It says that there's a secret to success, and what it says is, I'm going to give you half of it. Well, the half it gives you is everything starts with a thought. So that's what he's given you. Well, I read that book and I'm like, okay, everything starts with a thought. Okay. And I'm like, and so, usually if I didn't get it right away, like most of us, we just put the book down and go find something else. But I'm like, well, I've got to figure this out. I mean, I just know that this book, it has got it in here, but it's not on the surface. It's buried in this thing. And so it probably took me it took me two weeks of being dejected about it. And then it took me, I would say, a month after I got over being dejected and really made myself dig into it. It took me a month to 6 weeks to really figure out, oh, the central concept is what you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And then it took me another, probably month or two to figure out, well, how do I create a practical tool for that? So I created this template that that I share with everybody, and that's how I did it. And then the income started happening probably went to seven figures probably uh, 2.5 years after that.
Wow. That's really not that much time, really, when you think about that kind of jump in income.
Right.
That's such a big jump.
I'll tell you something you'd find interesting, and we were talking about this earlier. So, when I created this, right before I joined Genius Network, in fact, um, I'd probably had it for a couple of years. I'd created it. I was starting to teach it at the University of Texas. I had made it work on other people. And I thought, well, I'm going to go find the top expert in the world on success and show it to him and see what he says about it in case there's something, you know, out there like it, or if there's flaws in it. I want to know. And so that person, in my view, and a lot of people's view, is Darren Hardy, the former publisher of Success Magazine. So I figure out a way to meet Darren, and so I write a big check, and I'm able to spend 3 days with him. And I finally sit down with him, and I'm all excited, and I show it to him, and he looks at it and goes, John, this is good. And he looks at it a little closer, and he goes, wow, this is really excellent. But he says, you got a problem. People aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day doing this. I'm like, wait a minute, Darren, how can that be? This is the top book in the world ever written on success by a factor of 10. It's only 12 minutes a day. How can that be? He says, well, that doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to me. But he says, for the vast majority of people, they're not going to spend 12 minutes a day on anything to impact their success and achievement in life. And he says, that's the dirty little secret of the success and human achievement field. And he says, people just sleepwalk through life often. They hear a great idea, but they take no action. And he was pointing this out to me, and he says, you have to get people to wake up and see, wow, you got the top application in the world of the top book in the world, and it's right there, and they can apply it in 12 minutes a day. And so that was very enlightening to me when he shared that with me.
Yeah. So, well, what did you do with that? Let me ask you that, because I could see how that'd be kind of jolting.
Well, it was a little jolting, but it made me realize the key thing, which this is not for everyone. This is for people that are truly driven to achieve more, where success is a necessity, not just a preference. I mean, that's what he told me. He says, for most people, more success is just a preference. Well, for me, and for you too, and for a lot of your audience, that's not us. We're driven to be successful, and we just want to find a way to do it. If you got something that's 12 minutes a day, we're all over it. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, 12 minutes a day, I on the one hand, I understand. I understand where his information came from, or his advice. He's probably right, because it is really hard for 12 minutes a day for most people to kind of slow down. We get so busy. I was talking to a buddy of mine this weekend, and he's an author and a speaker, and he impacts people's lives in a major way. And he was telling me too, he's like, the reality is if I don't follow up with these people, and I'm able to have some sort of follow up from whether they heard me in a talk that I did at their company, or on stage somewhere, or some one-on-one work, if we don't have follow up, people just get so busy and they get so caught up in what's going on in their lives. Right. They don't ever implement any of it. So I might have been great. I might have done the best I could have done that day, and they could have loved it. And if they don't stop to slow down and implement it, just none of it matters.
Right. Well, it's the other thing that's interesting about Darren Hardy, sort of to this point. It's interesting. When he was 19 years old, he was a realtor. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. I heard that about him. Yeah.
And so when he was 19 years old, he's becomes a realtor, and he's working in an office with 10 people, 10 other realtors. And so he's noticing after about 3 or 4 months that everybody's really busy, but they're not doing the stuff that moves the needle. They're doing more busy work. And he has the bright idea. He goes, well, I'm going to do all the stuff that they don't want to do, the cold calling, the, working their territory, creating, things of value to his clients. And so he starts doing that, and he focuses only on that, and doesn't do all the stuff that the other people are doing. And Kevin, within 6 months, he was the top producing agent in the office. And within 12 months, he was doing more business than all the rest of them combined at 20 years old. And in visiting with him about that, we were talking about this, and this is why I love realtors and why I think realtors are the quintessential entrepreneurs. I created a template in my program for realtors because I see that what made Darren successful was the thoughts that were going on in his head, which drove his actions. And so in the template I created for realtors, I teach you here's, and you already know them, but I teach you, here's the things that move the needle in being a realtor. And when you feed this to yourself every day, you're going to actually do them where everybody else is going to not do them, because some of it is hard, but the more you sort of get into it, the easier it gets. And, and,
Absolutely.
and so, one thing I have for your audience is I did a webinar that that I'd like your audience to take, and they can find it at theunfairedge.com, theunfairedge.com, and it's a webinar that will show you how this 12-minute a day technique works, the science behind it, shows you people doing it, and I will provide your audience with the real estate realtor template. And so that's how your audience can learn even more about this.
Well, that's very kind of you. I really appreciate that. That's a big deal. So let me ask you this too before we wrap up here, because so theunfairadvantage.com, right? That's
Right.
the URL. We'll put that in the show notes as
The
well. I'm
unfairedge.com.
sorry, theunfairedge.com.
Right.
Theunfairedge.com. We'll make sure that gets in the notes. What are other? So obviously we can go there. What are some other places? Do you prefer people connect with you at? So I know obviously we've got the other URL
Right.
And whatnot, and you've got a book called Think It Be It, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so are those the best ways to do that, is to go to those URLs and to check out that book?
Right. Right. The book is forthcoming, but I've almost evolved to see that my course is more valuable than the book, because it sort of goes back to that same thing I learned with reading Think and Grow Rich. I want to apply the book, and so I see that a course with video and with templates and that type of thing is more powerful than having a book. And so the book is sort of written, but I'm like, I just think the online course is more powerful.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, what I like about a course versus a book is that in order to consume it, you actually have to like work through it, right? And so
Right.
that sort of in a way, I guess it doesn't really force you, but there's what's more likely that you're going to go into action if you're going through a course as opposed to flipping through pages on a book. So I can see why you do that. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. And people can reach me at John at thinkitbeit.net if they want to.
Awesome.
But probably the better place is theunfairedge.com, because then they can see the details of this webinar and see and again, it's free. So
Yeah. That's fantastic, guys. Take a look. I think that if you got anything out of this conversation today, I think you'll understand that John's got a lot to offer. And gosh, just look at the results that has showed up in his life. That is in and of itself more than enough proof that it could probably could help us move a little further down the road to where we're all hoping to get to. So, John, before we go, do you have any sort of parting thoughts or anything else that a burning desire to share with us that we haven't had a chance to get to yet today?
well, I think here's what I've come to realize is that it's all about working smarter. We can't work any harder than we are. And what this 12-minute a day mental technique is, it's living a life of immense intention and clarity. And when you have that, when you can do that, and you have a tool for doing that, you have control over your life, which is ultimately what we all want. And that lack of control is what causes stress. And so, to me, this is truly a success formula, a proven success formula. And throughout my life in my 30s and 40s, I kept on thinking, well, there's got to be a success formula. When I find it, it'll be great. And then when I turn 50, I'm like, well, I guess one doesn't exist. And so I didn't realize that it existed, but it's buried in the book Think and Grow Rich, and I had to sort of unearth it to really create what I consider a true success formula.
As some people would say, it was hidden for you, not from you.
Right. Yeah. Good
So,
point.
yeah.
Good point.
Well, that's very cool. Guys, take a look. I can't recommend it enough. Like I said, I've had the opportunity to listen to John in person before. I'm excited to kind of dive back into this as well. And so take a look at the website. Again, it's linked here in the show notes along with John's contact information. And John, I just wanted to say thank you very much for agreeing to be a guest on our show today.
Hey, my pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you, Kevin.
Thanks so much. And Next Level podcast listeners, we will talk to you again soon. Have a great day.